afternoon. No, I've already introduced you this morning. All I can ask you some more questions if you like. Okay. All right, we'll just do some two-answer things, yeah? You choose one out of the two. Do you know, so if I say cheese or chocolate, you choose one of them.
Well, that's a zero. If I'm talking about myself.
I'm just going to hand it over to you. Here you go.
I am pretty careful about what I eat. Sugar is a toxin to the brain, literally. And it increases inflammation. And inflammation is now known as the precursor to dementia. And you may not get it right away, you may not get it at all, or you may get it, along the way. So sugar is really one of the worst things you can do for your brain. And I have to tell you, when somebody offers me chocolate, I have to think carefully. Am I going to be lecturing? I can't do any chocolate. Not lecturing today, maybe 2 bites. And by the way, after 2 bites of a dessert, you're only eating from memory. And if you remember that, you stop after 2 bites. Got it? All right. So the most common question I get from young people is, does brain research in any way align or show up in Scripture? Or is there nothing in Scripture? There's lots of stuff in Scripture. One of my friends did that topic for her PhD. She found 400 correlations. We're not doing that this afternoon, so don't get nervous. But we'll do a few of them. And it's very comforting for anybody who reads Scripture to realize that it does align with brain function. Now, there's something I forgot to mention this morning, and that is get up and move around anytime you want to. 20% of people only learn when they're moving. And so when you are in school and they tell you to sit down and shut up and do your work and you can't move, but you have a brain that needs to be moving to learn, you're kind of in trouble. So anytime you want to stand up, just go stand up. And I've got a clock that Paul found me. Isn't that wonderful? I didn't have a clock this morning. All right. I probably better put my glasses on. I'm sorry. Sometimes my eyes work really good. Where's my...
How's your memory? I think it's over there. It's just over there.
Sit down, will you?
You said to move around.
I did say that. But you tower over me.
It dispels the myth, you're saying we learn when we move around, so that's why the hyperactive children are.
Well, you got that right.
Yes.
There's three types of... There's many ways to describe the brain, but 3 ways to describe the brain has to do with the amount of activity that really is required for that brain to learn. So you've got one group that are the visuals. 60% of the population are visual, meaning whatever they see registers most quickly in their brain. They don't need to move to learn. The second group are the auditories. That's only 20% of the population. They don't particularly need to move to learn. But then you've got the kinesthetics, and the kinesthesia involves taste, odors, touch, body position, and they can't stand to be still. And if they are on top of that, extroverted, they're just busy little bees everywhere. And you can usually pick them up in a group. They just can't stay seated. They got to find some reason to get up and move and so on. And that's not bad. But if you are different from them, it's likely, if you don't understand this, you think they're weird. And you may be the one that's weird. So who knows? All right. So I already talked about the fact that this is the most common question I get. And yes, I think we have some answers. So number one, Scripture says, think on these things. True, honest, just, pure, lovely, good, virtuous, praiseworthy. Are those positive or negative words? They're all positive words, which means that when you think with your brain, and only 20% of it is conscious thought, and that's right here behind your forehead. When you think with your brain, everything is positive or negative. There's really nothing in between. And so if you're thinking, let's say you meet somebody and they're not your favorite kind of person and they're telling you their life story and you really won't want to stay there, and your brain is thinking, man, what can I do to get out of this? How can I move, I just can't stand this person. Your brain wants congruence. And so it will immediately begin trying to collect out of your memory every time you felt this way before. And as those memories pop up, pretty soon you're ready just to sock them in the mouth and walk off. And it's very difficult. If you have one episode of getting really angry at somebody, it's going to take you 72 hours to rebalance your body. And 72 hours is a long time. And if before that 72 hours is done, you start thinking negative thoughts about somebody else again, or about work or something like that, now you change all of the hormones in your brain, and now you've got 72 more hours until you're back normal. And I've met some people I don't think ever had been out of that particular cycle, and it's not very good. So negative thinking can become a habit, because when you think negatively, you pour out cortisol and adrenaline, and those are both addictive substances. So Scripture, when it says think of positive things, that doesn't mean you don't acknowledge when something is negative, but you don't take it in and start rehearsing it and endlessly think about it. 2, as you think in your heart, so are you. A lot of the ancients, and no, I didn't know them personally, thought that the heart, was the brain. The Egyptians just took the brain out and got rid of it because they didn't think it was worth anything, and preserved the heart, as I'm told. But I don't know that much about embalming. But the heart is a separate organ that's unusual. Like the brain, it's got its own nervous system. It's only got about 40,000 neurons or so, but it has an independent relay with the brain. They call it an unmediated channel, meaning there's no governors on the channel, and back and forth, it's working all the time. The brain actually talks to the heart more than the heart talks to the brain. But if, let's say something happens and you're really sad, you feel bad about it, and the heart will send a message up to the brain and say, it's pretty bad down here. Things aren't going well, and so said something unkind to me, and I'm feeling really terrible. The brain will go, oh dear, I didn't know it was that bad. Well, let me see. Come to think about it, I don't feel so good either. And they'll send that message down to the brain, and now the brain feels doubly upset. And as it goes on, you can become very depressed. They reinforce what each other's feeling. So if you get a negative message from your heart, You choose whether you're going to keep thinking about it or whether you're going to change the way you think. And that's the only thing that you have control over in this world, is what you choose to think. And it's pretty easy to get out of the doldrums if you want to. Number 3 is be not dismayed. And the synonyms for that are agitated or stressed. Stress is really not good for the brain when it's negative. Now, we're all stressed all the time at some level. I'm stressed now because I'm standing up and talking to you. But it's not a negative stress because I enjoy it, and I'm happy to share information with you. But negative stress is really very damaging to the brain. And actually, it can result, if you're negative year after year after year, in developing an actual depressive disorder, which is not good for anybody. Your enteric system is called your second brain. It contains 600 million neurons. That's not very much compared to the brain, which is, 86 billion? 90% of serotonin. Serotonin is a brain and body substance that help you feel better. And 90% of your serotonin is in your gut, not in your brain. And 50% of all the dopamine in your body is in your gut, not in your brain. And dopamine is the feel-good chemical, feel better chemical. Doesn't make you feel wonderful necessarily, but you feel better than you did at that moment. The vagus nerve, I'm sure you know, is one of the largest nerves in the body, and it connects the brain to your gut. So the years that I was a school nurse, little kids would come to school in the morning, boys especially, and they'd complain of having a stomachache or not feeling very good. And almost without exception, it would turn out that the parents had been arguing before the kids left for school that morning. And your brain didn't like it, and your gut did not like it, and the gut started making them feel like they were going to throw up. So it's very, very important. I'm sure you've heard of the irritable bowel syndrome. Its other name is an enteric neuropathy, meaning degeneration of the neurons. And if you catch it early, it has a lot to do. I'm not saying that everybody causes it, but if you have a habit of being agitated and stressed, and the enteric nervous system pours out all these strong digestive chemicals, you can exacerbate what you have. All right, 4, never worry or be anxious about anything. How does that work in your life? It doesn't say that you shouldn't be aware of what's happening and deal with it, but it says you should be anxious about nothing. Anxiety is the #1 mental illness. Do you know that on planet Earth? Anxiety disorders. And that's the same no matter what country I look it up. And worry and anxiety downshifts the brain. And we'll be talking about that in another little section because it's fabulous research. It focuses its attention away from the frontal cortex, which is conscious thought, and down to the brain stem, right down here. You think with your brain stem, but it's never conscious. In your brain stem is loaded probably everything that's ever happened to you from about the 7th month on, especially in the unconscious part of the brain. So now researchers believe that the fetus knows, #1, if it was wanted. #2, it knows if it's the right sex. Did the parents want a girl or did they want a boy? And that's really can be devastating for a child because it's not going to be showing up at a conscious level. But they'll always tend to feel like something's wrong here. Yeah, because their mother wanted a son and their father wanted a daughter, and nobody told them that while they were pregnant. If you get downshifted, you don't do a good job brainstorming. You have problems with problem solving, can't seem to solve problems. You go back and forth and overthink everything. You have problems with willpower. And you know, willpower was not designed to stop a behavior, and you really need to understand that. You cannot stop a behavior through willpower. The only way you change your behavior is to create a brand new behavior and concentrate on that, and gradually the pathway for the old behavior becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. So worry and anxiety never help anything. They never change anything. So get rid of it. 5. Oh, forgot about this one. Anxiety and worry, they're part of the core emotion of fear. They're what I call energy eaters. They keep the stress response stimulated, so all of this is ongoing. You get immune system suppression, increased digestive disorders, increased muscle tension, short-term memory loss, premature coronary artery disease, heart attacks, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. It's really, really a negative thing to do. You want to avoid it. Worldly sorrow brings death. Okay, we need sadness. It's a core emotion. Sadness tells us that something very sad has happened to us. Usually something that we hoped would happen didn't happen, or something we hoped wouldn't happen did. And it's appropriate because it will help us recover from that. But you only want to do it short term, because if you get enmeshed in sadness, again, that can lead you to a semi-permanent depressive disorder, and then you go on medication, and medication is wonderful at times, but if you're taking it forever, in some cases it cannot be a good thing. Although anxiety is the #1 mental illness in the world, depressive disorders are the leading cause of ill health, which is kind of interesting. They're not quite as common, but they cause more problems in the body. Ill health, disability, divorce, which I found kind of interesting. They affect 300+ million persons, and of that, I see I have a spelling mistake. Well, I'm not perfect, what can I tell you? Half of all the people who have a depressive disorder also have an anxiety disorder. So you can see that an individual can be really seriously impacted. We do not grieve as those who have no hope. And this is especially important for people who belong to religions that seem to think that they know who's going to be saved and who isn't. And you can't know that. Because Jeremiah says that when God makes up his kingdom, he looks on the heart and the mind of each individual to see if they really wanted a relationship with him. But you can't look at behaviors necessarily and say, oh, well, you know, that person's never gonna go to heaven. Can't do that, because there's many reasons for behavior, some of which are really out of the control of the person when there's mental illness. So remember that. Unresolved grief is the second leading cause of death worldwide. So you can really hasten your own death if you're grieving inappropriately or grieving unnecessarily or for too long. In all circumstances, give thanks. How does that work for your brain? It doesn't say in all circumstances be thankful for them. It says in all circumstances give thanks. And why would you do that? Because fear and sorrow and so on cannot coexist in the brain with thankfulness. Cannot coexist in the brain with thankfulness. You're one or the other. So thankfulness is actually an antidote to fear. I grew up in a family with a mother who was very fearful. She was fearful about being fearful. And I know that's partly her background, but it didn't. She had stomach ulcers and all kinds of things. So how thankful genuinely are you every day? When I wake up in the morning, I have trained myself, I think of something for which I'm thankful immediately. And then throughout the day, and if something bad happens to me, I address it if I need to, and otherwise I'm thankful that it wasn't any worse than it was, because gratitude keeps your emotions and your feelings and your consciousness sort of in sync. It really promotes congruence, and the more thankful you are, the more grateful you are. And when you do large sample studies, there's a lot of people that aren't very thankful or grateful. Oh, this is a good one. When we got this information, we started working with the cardiovascular program. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as God forgave you. Well, is there anybody here who hasn't forgiven somebody for something? Because it'll kill you. Work by Dr. His name just slipped up. There's a physician who's been doing worldwide research, and unforgiveness is hazardous to your health and to your longevity. So it's really important to look around and see if there's anybody you didn't forgive for something they did to you. And you don't have to tell them, you don't have to see them, you just have to forgive them, because then that'll move your body back in balance. These are examples from the cardiovascular system of what happens to the heart when you're kind and thankful and when you're unkind and frustrated. So you can see on the left how even the heartbeat is, very, very regular, no spikes. But on the other hand, if you've got unkindness and you're very frustrated and you've got unforgiveness, look at that irregular pattern. And if it goes on long enough, that in itself can create a heart attack. So we really can control many things about our body and whether or not we get some of these other symptoms. It's not always easy for people who grew up thinking negatively, but you can learn to stop that. You really can. And you can forgive anybody, because what's it benefiting you to hang on to unforgiveness? It's not doing you any good. It's increasing all your stress responses in your body. So just forgive them. And you don't have to see them. You don't have to write and let them know. You just forgive them. And I had a little forgiveness work to do because I was raised in a family where there was a lot of fear that you weren't going to do life right, that you were not quite good enough, and that's really dramatically awful for your health. So when you go home, think about it. Is there somebody who did something to you? When I did this process, I remembered back when I'd gone to school in the 8th grade, and I admit that I'm a little odd In some ways, I'm not like the average person. I laugh when nobody else is laughing. So there's this one, and I hear myself saying things. You know, if Zen was honest, he'd tell you that sometimes I blurt something out that I had no intention of saying. No intention whatsoever. And then I wonder, why did I say that? So there was this guy in the next grade up, and he was not amused with my blurting things out. And I remember as clearly today as I did, in the last century. I said something, and he said, "You know, you are the stupidest person I've ever met, and you are never going to have a boyfriend." And I hung on to that for a few weeks, which was really stupid. But once you forgive him, it doesn't matter what he says. It's their stuff, not my stuff. So look around at things you may be hanging on to that you really would be better to let go. A happy heart is good medicine, and it is good medicine. There have been a couple of people who have developed laugh clubs around the world. And you go into the laugh club for 15 minutes. You can't say a word, but when you cross the threshold, you have to start laughing. And it seems really silly at first, but with everybody laughing, you can't stay there and not laugh, because laughter's contagious, just like yawning. And laughter is wonderful. It reduces stress majorly. When you're very stressed, the two hemispheres that are connected by 4 bridges, the corpus callosum, they get disconnected. And now you don't have the advantage of bringing each hemisphere to work on a problem you might be having. Laughter removes that roadblock. It's that simple. You start laughing and the roadblock is gone. It helps you fight viruses like flu. It helps memory functions. It helps avoid constipation. So if you've been taking magnesium by the bottle, you're not probably laughing a lot. It helps with learning information. It helps with retrieving information that has been loaded from short-term to long-term memory. So research shows you need about 30 mirthful laughs a day to be healthy. Now, some people who are really healthy and very old, beyond the 70 that most people live, they can live 20, 30, 40 years more just because they laugh all the time. And that's one reason I like coming to Australia, and I hated COVID because I couldn't fly anywhere. And most of the people who make me laugh on this world are from Australia. So I've been trying to get a group together in America to start a laugh club. 10, rejoice. This is almost like the positive thinking, except it actually says to you, rejoice for something. Be really thankful for something. Health benefits linked with optimism and joy, and there's a whole bunch of them. Increased lifespan, literally, measurably. Lower rates of depression, lower levels of distress, greater resistance to cold, better psychological health, improved physical health and well-being, reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. I could go on and on and on with the benefits. So how much do you laugh? Literally, how much do you laugh? When somebody says something that's a little off color, or whatever, do you groan and just say, oh, well, there they go again? When are they going to get it together? Or do you really genuinely laugh and enjoy it? And I genuinely laugh. It doesn't take a whole lot to make me laugh because I've been practicing a lot. Okay. Oh, we got another whole list of this. See, look, this is from the National Institute of Aging. Reduced likelihood of cognitive impairment. Dementia's cognitive impairment. And there's other types of things that are in that category. Better eating and exercising habits. Well, I know people who exercise really well, but they're addicted to sugar. That's not a good thing, but they're doing part of it. Reduced risk for strokes and heart attacks, better problem solving and judgment, fewer memory problems, beneficial health-related outcomes among cancer survivors. Many studies about people who have cancer, they get together in groups and they laugh. Some of them definitely eventually die, but usually their lifespan is much more prolonged than the cancer victims who don't do this. Try it. You know, if I'm nervous, I'm at home by myself, I'll just start laughing. Doesn't embarrass me at all. It reminds me, in Australia, I was lecturing several years ago, and I was talking about how reading aloud, especially if you can do some humorous reading aloud, how much that really stimulates your brain to think positively. And I was talking about that, and I heard a voice out there somewhere saying, well, I couldn't read aloud. And I said, I don't know if it was a male or a female. I think it was a woman, but I'm not sure. I said, why can't you read aloud? Well, I'd be embarrassed. I said, why would you be embarrassed? Because I live alone. I have to frankly admit that I didn't get the correlation. So here I am trying to help the person, and I said, well, do you have any pets? And the voice said, yes, I have a Himalayan cat. I said, good, put the cat on your lap, read aloud, the cat will love it, and you'll start feeling that I couldn't do that. Why not? Well, the cat wouldn't know what I was saying. I gave up, I just went on. Okay, sing for joy, strike the tambourine, play the melodious harp, and lyre. Music is one of the few things that have been found on this planet to completely engage the entire brain. Many things just engage one quadrant or one half, something like that. Music engages the entire brain. And depending if you're singing or playing an instrument, you will get a difference in posture, in how you breathe. It's very good for you. Listening or playing music can provide pain relief because it releases B endorphins, which is a natural painkiller. So last July, I fell and broke my left wrist. I smashed it. I'd already broken it once when I was 8, fell off the toboggan up in Canada. And it was fairly painful. And one of the things I did was play a lot of music. Not me playing with just one hand, but playing music and listening to it. And it really does take your mind off the pain. And there's a lot of research about that. Oh yes, pray without ceasing. I mentioned this morning. I had a lot of trouble with this. It was one of the Bible verses that I chose to memorize. My father wanted me to memorize a new verse every week. I started out with Jesus wept, and that was wonderful. It's really easy to remember. And then I kept looking for more texts that were just 2 words. Finally ran out of them. So then I went to 3 words, and I found pray without ceasing. Newberg, who is a neo-theologian, a researcher who studies what happens to the brain when you pray, says that prayer is just a form of meditation. It decreases metabolic activity. That's really important. What that means is you can think with the brain using less glucose, which saves you work. And so it increases blood flow to the brain. It triggers this deafferentation, which is, you cut your finger and you don't feel anything until the information about the cut goes up to the brain, and then all of a sudden you hear it, you feel it. Well, I hear it too, as I'm groaning. But we can pray anytime, anywhere, about anything. And it provides the greatest personal benefits to us. So, singing. I thought we just did singing. Did I press the wrong one again? I can see you nodding vigorously. All right. Any of you that were not here this morning? Okay, then I'll briefly go over this, because we did talk about this morning, but it's new research, and I think it's really exciting. So there's 2 PET scans, and it's a fairly recent modality for studying the brain. On the left side is what a brain looks like in an individual who's not praying. I don't know what they're thinking about. Think about anything they want, but don't pray. And you can notice that anytime you see a bright red spot, that's where the brain is very, very active. And on this PET scan, if you look down at the bottom left, you'll see those 2 big red patches and another round one next to it. That shows that the part of the brain that does routine activities is very active. And routine activities are the stuff of everyday living that you may not want to do. Vacuuming the carpet, washing the car, making meals, doing the parts of your job you don't particularly enjoy, and you're using just this little corner of the brain. The picture on the right is the same person who was now praying while they were taking the PET scan. And you can notice that up on the top, there's a bright red one right almost in the middle, and then another very long one. This is the right frontal cortex. And it is the part of the brain that researchers believe that you use when you are praying to God. And down on the right, you will see another bright red part that wasn't visible on the other one. And this is where you relate to people. Friendship, communication, encouragement, and so on. And here's the conclusion. Prayer is an anti-aging strategy. Now, tell me how many of you knew that prayer was an anti-aging strategy? Good, one of you. Okay, well, you're probably doing good. It slows the age-related decline of the frontal lobes. It strengthens memory, which is helping to be preventive of dementias, if you do it regularly for 12 minutes a day. So, do you all pray a minimum of 12 minutes a day? And if you don't, you're missing out on using a very powerful strategy to help your brain stay cogent and avoid dementia. This was the outcome of several of those studies. Participants who prayed or reflected in a quiet, comfortable place for at least 12 minutes a day showed reduction in headaches. I used to have terrible migraines. I don't have headaches at all anymore. Less worry and anxiety, lower risk of heart attacks, lowering of high blood pressure, enhanced wound healing, significant improvement in memory functions, and it provides some control over how your brain ages. Did you know that research shows that 70% of everything that can affect your health, you can partially or completely control. That's a lot. You have 30% of factors from your childhood and upbringing that you can't control, but you can identify them and you can resolve them. But 70% is in your hand to control the rate of aging. And I would very much suggest you might want to take a look at that. Because I told them this morning I'd like to be a super centenarian, 110, 120, with good mental, emotional, physical function. May not get there, but I think I'll get farther than if I don't pay any attention to that. Bruce Lipton, he's a wonderful researcher. Arguably, he is the most knowledgeable person on the planet right now about well, let's say that you can have certain things that you can control and certain things you can't control. But you can control 70% of your life's choices versus 30%. So Scripture says, study to show yourself approved. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Well, that's true because we have a lot of knowledge in our countries, but people aren't following it. They have, you see, information is not knowledge. Information is just information. You have to take that information and practically apply it, turn it into knowledge, and then you are able to use it. But Scripture says people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. As one researcher said, this is the information age, and people are perishing right and left, not from lack of information, but from lack of knowledge. They've not turned the information into practical application. So Dr. Lipton says, your perspective is always limited by how much you know. And we hear each other saying that. You only know what you know. That's true. You only know what you know, but you can learn more than you know right now. And he says if you expand your knowledge, you'll transform your mind. And people who embrace that, we've even found individuals who were starting down the line of dementia, some of whom actually had a somewhat genetic background for it. They eventually died, but their onset of dementia was much slower than people who didn't actively start taking information and turning it into knowledge and practically applying it. So the last scripture is Corinthians, Paul. I set before you life and prosperity, death and destruction. Choose life so that you and your children may live. Estimates are that this generation is the first generation on planet Earth to live shorter lives than their parents. And it's definitely tied to lifestyle. Lifestyle choices are huge in terms of obesity, type 2 diabetes, that could go on to type 3 diabetes, which is, of course, Alzheimer's, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and so on. So prosper and be in good health, even if your soul prospers. So I always think of the soul as part of the cognitive part of the brain. And it's worth paying attention to. So anybody want to throw out some questions, or are we done for a break? You are not allowed to ask questions then. Yes? And I said earlier that sugar is very toxic to the brain. It's type 3 diabetes because it has to do with insulin resistance. You know, some people have type 2 diabetes, but they don't have a lot of insulin resistance yet. So it has to do with insulin resistance and some other factors that are largely preventable. But in the United States, oh my goodness, I think someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's every 93 seconds or something like that. And if it goes at that rate, it's going to totally bankrupt the healthcare because it's very expensive. So it's worth maintaining a person's weight is often really critical because high obesity is a definite risk factor for Alzheimer's. And you can handle your weight. It's a matter of thinking ahead and deciding how healthy you want to be and what you're going to eat and what you aren't. And your brain is like, it's trainable. It's interesting that the brain starts developing during pregnancy about the 7th month of gestation, doctors think. And eventually, it develops so that it tells the brain what to do. We're the only creatures on the planet that has that happen. So the brain creates, the mind. Now the mind can tell the brain what to do. And it will do what you tell it. And it will depend how you tell it and how often you tell it and the words you use, because the brain only operates on the premise that something is happening right now. It never gets in gear unless it thinks something's happening right now. And so when you talk to your brain to tell it what to do, first of all, you use your first name so that the brain knows who you're talking about. You're not talking about, Joe Blow or somebody else. So I would start with Arlene. All right, what is it that I want my brain to do? We got the research on dehydration and how many babies and young children, when they're fussy, their parents feed them food. They don't give them water first, they feed them with food. So they don't discriminate between hunger and thirst. And that pattern continues through their lifetime. Some children in the study don't drink any water at all. They only drink pop, chocolate milk, stuff like that. The brain needs water because it functions very much like a hydroelectric plant. It literally, with the water, generates energy that it stores as ATP. So what you do today is going to influence the amount of energy you have tomorrow. So I probably wasn't drinking enough water, and by the time you hit about age 50, your thirst recognition ability is gone, so you're not even thirsty. So you have to drink by choice, not because you're thirsty. And I was at a wonderful seminar by a couple of physicians, and this is the analogy they used. The brain has to have water, period. You may have some fluid coming in, but it's not water. And if you drink anything that is diuretic, you pee out more than you're taking in. So many people over age 50 are very dehydrated. So the guy said, so here's the deal. The neurons in your brain have started to shrink because you don't have enough water. 1% dehydration, you don't even know, even if your thirst is working, you don't even know you're thirsty yet. 1% dehydration is worth a 5% decrease in your ability to think. And that can be deadly. So he says there's not enough water coming in. And so the brain radios down to the bladder because that's the largest repository of any fluid in your body at any one time. And it says we need some fluid up here. So the brain causes the bladder to dehydrate what's in it to some degree, and it sends water up to the brain. And the physician said, I mean, that's just turned me into a pea brain. He said, I can't imagine trying to think with urine. So you have to make the plan to keep drinking. And the easiest way to do it, he said, was check your urine a couple times a day. And unless you're taking medication that really turns your urine orange, look at your urine, and you need at least 2 very pale episodes of pee during the day in order to stay regulated and not dehydrated. So in the seminar, here's this guy at the back. I don't know if he was joking or what, but he says, well, how am I going to know what color my pee is? And the guy blinked and he says, look at it. So you might try checking yourself for a while and see how you're doing. And if it's a very dark color, know that your kidneys are struggling. And of course, you want to drink most of what you drink before about 6 or 7 at night, unless you want to get up and pee a lot at night. But even that would be better than getting dehydrated. Okay, any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Good question. There are a few people who are born with something wrong with their blood sugar system, and they're type 1 diabetes. And there's nothing you can do to change that. But so what? A lot of us has things we can't change. What you have to then start doing is being really, really careful about how much you exercise, what you eat, when you eat, avoiding high sugar and stuff like that. And diabetes type 1 is very manageable. If you develop type 2 diabetes, it means that you haven't been probably terribly careful about some of these things. And again, you know, I hate to keep harping on sugar, but it is absolutely a brain toxin. It is now believed to be the precursor for diabetes type 3 or Alzheimer's because it causes inflammation in the brain. You know what inflammation is. You cut yourself and it gets hot and red and stuff as it's healing. Well, it keeps the brain, the more sugar you eat, the more it keeps the brain in a state of inflammation. And that will increase your risk of developing any disease that's related to inflammation. So, you know, you just look at the hand you've been dealt in life and you work on what you can do to stay as healthy as you can and prevent some of these other side effects. But many people just give up and just say, well, I know what I like, so I'm going to keep eating it. That's a choice. Yes. Oh, did I digress from that? Okay. So I said that the brain creates the mind, and then the mind can tell the brain what to do. And it's very important how you talk to your brain. I think I got as far as you have to use your first name, Arlene, and then you must speak in short, positive sentences, and you must tell the brain what to do as if you're already doing it, because the brain never gets in gear until it thinks, oh, I got to do that right now. So if you would say to your brain, I heard I need to drink a little bit more water. Well, let me see. Next week I'll start doing that, and I'll start looking at my pee every couple times a day. Brain does nothing. The brain says, when you get there, I'll help you. But most people never get there. And the brain knows that. And the brain will say, by the time next week comes, you've probably forgotten all about this, and I don't have to do anything. So if I wanted to tell my brain I needed more water, I would start with something like, Arlene, you are drinking a glass of water before your meal, or before every meal. And the brain goes, oh, we are? Okay. And it'll get in gear. I remember there was a big study of basketball players, which was really interesting. They took a whole bunch of basketball players, very famous experiment, and they divided them into two groups, and they're both pretty equally gifted at sinking baskets. So they told the one group, you are to go to the gym every single day for 1 hour for X number of days, and the only thing you're going to do is practice shooting baskets. They said to the other group, you're not going to go near the gym or any place that there's a basket, but you are going to just sit quietly, and you are going to see yourself hitting the basket, and you're going to say, Arlene, your ball hits the basket. And when they tested them X number of weeks later, there was only 1% improvement in the guys that were actually in the gym. That's staggering, absolutely staggering. But Dr. Ethan Cross talks about how important it is to always talk to your brain, and to always talk in a positive way, as if I need this right now, and it will respond. Oh, never use I. I activates your self-esteem issue. And if it's something that's hard and you say, I'm doing this, the brain goes, oh, no, you're not. So always your name and just you are, or something like that. Okay, is that clear? Oh, good. Keep me on track. All right, is that good enough? I think we need a break, right? You're in charge.
I'm glad you recognize that.
Do you need the mic?
No, I'm fine without it. Okay,
This
so...
is very loud in my ear.
Okay. Wow, that's really loud. So we're going to have a 10-minute break. There are some options out there. So Shirley's made this beautiful platter of healthy, non-type 2, type 3 inducing foods. We also have a bag full of those foods, but we're going to have the elders monitoring how many you have. If you go for too many, they will come and quietly and respectfully have a prayer with you and then stop you from having any more. So we'll break up for 10 minutes and then we'll be back. The water, well, yeah, you have to go down to the kitchen and get the water because I forgot to...
I don't drink enough water.
My doctor said to me, the last time I went to see her, with a urine infection, you got to drink a bottle like this a day.
Well, you know how Arlene's got a water bottle? A lot of people carry.
All right, can I get a show of hands? Who had a chocolate biscuit? If your hand is up, who had 2 chocolate biscuits? Who had 3 chocolate biscuits? Who had 4 chocolate biscuits? No, kidding. Oh, Arlene's just walked out. She doesn't like the questions I'm asking. Arlene, is that hard liquor or is that water? You've left the room. They're wondering if you're tippling. It's all my business. Okay, well, we can't really start until she gets back, obviously. But what I'd like you all to do is come up with a really curly, difficult question to ask her. So the questions that you've wanted to ask but haven't been able to, this is now the time to do it. And the longer she takes to come in, the harder the question. She's talking with Trace. Trace, don't let the fact that we're all waiting for you speed you up in any way. And just in case anyone needs to know, Tracy's nickname is Trish. Trisha, from this morning. Yeah. Okay. Now that Arlene is back, did you have enough water? That's good. Your brain needed some? What did I do in the introduction? Okay, so this is the final presentation of the day. And as I said, be gentle, but ask any questions you like. Don't make them too difficult or taxing, because she's had a busy week. So we're now going to do downshifting, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It sounds like a Clint Eastwood film. You can read. I'm quite high functioning. Okay, I'll hand it over to you before you do anything else dodgy.
We try. There are many different types of people in the world. All right. Downshifting is a relatively new area of discovery, and you can compare it to the gears in an automatic transmission. They automatically downshift when something they perceive is happening that needs a different gear. And now we know that the brain does the same thing. So I'll go through this as quickly as I can and try to save a little time if there's any more questions, but Zen is not allowed to ask any more. All right, it's a term. It's not a medical term per se, but it's a term to describe the brain's automatic, and this is a long word, psychophysiological response, meaning that it can be a physical response, it can be a mental response. If it perceives that something is not safe, and it can be real or imagined, and that's the problem, because fear is designed to alert you that something is dangerous and allow you to take appropriate action. But the problem is that imagined fear does the same thing. And a lot of people are just inundated with imaginary fear. And it's very detrimental because it will downshift your brain. And so if you can understand what happens when you downshift and how you can get upshifted, you can deal with that a lot better. Joseph Chilton Pierce is a researcher who has done a lot of work on downshifting, and this is what he says: fear of any kind, okay, get that, any kind, real or imagined, can throw the brain into a survival mode that, when fully active, shuts down higher levels of awareness. I couldn't say it as good as he does because it's really profound. This results in a shift of attention and energy away from the cerebrum, this third layer, clear down to the brain stem. In such instances, you tend to react on a more primitive level. And I would just say, forget more. You tend to react on a primitive level. And that's where you get the knee-jerk reactions to something somebody did or said. Everyone has downshifted. Everyone. And you can pick up in other people when they've downshifted, because all of a sudden they're not rational. They're saying things that aren't logical. And maybe their voice has gone up in, level or loudness or whatever, and you can often pick it up. Brain scans have finally explained what happens to the brain and the staggering consequences. Students failing in school, they come from a family where there's a lot of chaos, and they're fearful that mother's going to get hit again, or dad's going to have a frying pan on his head again, or something like that. And it's frightening for them, so they downshift. So they come to school and they don't learn. And now the teacher says, "What's wrong with you? You turned this in and you've only got 3 right out of 10. Okay, that's scary again. Am I going to fail?" So they downshift again. Adults failing to follow protocols for health and wellness, making poor choices, engaged in dangerous behaviors. This is how it's been described by researchers: a lightning-fast roller coaster ride, where you arrive at the bottom disoriented, with your stomach in your throat, and your brain having no idea of what just happened. And I'm sure many of you have had that experience. And you kind of shake yourself and wonder, what just happened? Now, the degree of how far you downshift depends on how serious the brain thinks the issue is. So if it's just a sort of mild issue, you may even only go down to the mammalian level. But remember, there's no conscious thought below this prefrontal cortex. And if it's really bad, you'll go clear down to your brain stem, to the first brain layer. This is designed for genuine, bona fide situations of danger only. And as soon as you've resolved the danger, you move back up. But the problem is, you can keep reinforcing this, so you keep you stay downshifted, in other words. So children in school who come from very disorganized, chaotic homes may be getting very, very poor grades. They may be acting out in school, doing all kinds of behaviors because they're downshifted. And it's difficult. I feel very sorry for teachers today, very sorry for them, because little kids, especially, well, even up into high school, if the house is disorganized and they're fearful, maybe their parents got divorced and they hate each other, and so they're always talking down to each other, about each other. That's very frightening for children, because their parents are their support system. And it's bad enough when they separate, but when they separate and they're each talking bad about each other, those kids may stay downshifted for months, for years. Now, In situations that involve actual danger, something's happening and you realize it's very dangerous, the brain tends to direct its attention and energy, get that, its attention and energy outside of conscious control in the third layer and move it down. And it's looking for anything that will make it feel safer. So it may run away from something. It may go slam the door and hibernate in their bedroom. After one episode of downshifting, it's going to take the brain 72 hours to upshift. Because when you downshift, your brain and body is going to be filled with all of these substances in the brain and body that are released when you feel fearful. Now, if it's an imaginary fear and you resolve it, then you can get upshifted in 72 hours. But the problem is an imagined fear is usually with you. You imagine that something bad is going to happen and you keep thinking it's going to happen, or somebody says something awful to you and you keep rehearsing it and so on. So there's not just one episode. And so imaginary fear is really deadly because it can keep you downshifted for a very long time. And when you're downshifted, you cannot learn. Well, you can learn. You can learn something that's rote memory, like you could learn to count to 100, something like that, because it's very predictable, but it's not involving emotion or real life episodes. Now, downshifting can differ between boys and girls. Girls have much more trouble coping with permanent separation or death, and it will increase their anxiety. So they don't like it when their parents yell at each other. They don't like it when their parents get divorced. If one of them gets accidentally killed or dies because of illness or injury, they can stay downshifted for a long time. In adulthood, females tend to downshift when there's stress in the immediate environment, something that they don't exactly know what to do with, or they keep rehearsing about what I should do in the present, and it can turn into chronic stress, but they're likely to downshift during that stressful period. They get upset if their relationship is not going very well, or if they can't seem to find friends, and they're likely to downshift. Now, boys are very different. They have much more difficulty coping with parental fighting or divorce. It increases their anxiety. They often get stomach pains. The effects are more intense and can last longer. So let's say parents get divorced, and 2 to 3 years later, that boy is still downshifted. He's not learning. He's barely passing, or maybe he's flunking that grade. In adulthood, the male triggers are divorce, unemployment, and shame. So when you're dealing with males and boys, it's really important not to do anything that's going to make them feel shameful. You can correct their behavior without making them feel shame, because men don't deal well with shame. If they can't find a job, actually that's harder on them than it is on females. And it was surprising for me to learn in large sample studies that actually divorce is harder on men than it is on women. And women often say it's really hard because I don't have as much money as I used to have. Well, that's true, but you often, as a female, have female resources that you can talk to. There was a giant study done in the United States about who you can talk to when you feel stressed. And the average woman listed between 9 and 10 other women that they could call up and talk to when they felt stressed. The average man listed 1 or none. which means that if the one was that woman that is now divorced, he's got none. And that often triggers males to go out and do something really stupid, excessive speed driving, and often there are deaths that result simply because of this in men. Women don't go out and, drive 100 miles an hour and do dangerous things, but that's often how males cope with that, and it's too bad. In school, there are practices that are unfortunate. Now, I'm not sure, I'm not an educator in terms of schools, so I don't know what you would do to replace it, but some children are just petrified of tests. And they know the information, but they find trouble articulating it, or they don't write down the right answer, and they downshift, and that leads them toward failure. As the brain focuses its attention and energy to that first reptilian layer, that's where your reactive behaviors have been loaded. So if you grew up with bad things happening in the family, you load that behavior of how you responded in that first level. And so when you downshift, you're likely to exhibit some of those old learned behaviors trying to lower your anxiety. It's not going to help, but that's what happens. Now, what are some of the undesirable outcomes that occur if you downshift and if you don't know how to upshift really quickly? Well, memory failures. Research shows that people tend to remember less than 15% of what they were told during a crisis. And that's unfortunate. So something happens and you temporarily are very sick, and you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, do this, 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 and this, and you go home and you have no recollection of what you were told to do at all, because you only remember 15% of it. So that's why it's important to take somebody with you, or to record the conversation so you remember what the recommendations were. Anything that's cognitive learning, you have a decrease in that. You tend to be more likely to develop phobias. It accelerates the aging process, which is nothing that I'm excited about. And you actually alter a lot of your brain-body functions in relation to immune system. And I'm sure that you've probably heard that in 2016, they found that the brain has its own immune system. And up until then, they only knew about the body's immune system. And so if you look at an older book about body structure, and they're drawing in the immune system, you'll see that the immune system drawing stops right here. They didn't think there was any immune system in the brain whatsoever, and there's a huge one. It's called the glycemic system, and it works together with the body if everything's going well. If you're downshifted, you have a reduced ability to look at cues in the environment and take them into consideration. You're just not good at that. You are less able to engage in complex mental tasks. It's hard to memorize. You can know something very well and get up in front to perform, and suddenly everything's blank. You don't know anything, can't remember anything to say. You don't see connectedness in your behaviors and the result, or you're unable to generate solutions for problems, which is quite deadly. If you have a history of an addictive behavior, you're likely to fall back onto that addiction, and you start reactivating old learned behaviors, even if they no longer are good options for the present. It's really deadly stuff. So I thought you might like to just briefly know some of the factors that each of those brain layers contribute, so that you know when you're downshifting what you are losing in terms of structure. So, cerebrum, you know it has 8 lobes, 2 hemispheres, 4 chunks. This cortex makes up about 90% of the conscious part of your brain. It registers present tense, past tense, and future tense. It perceives both positives and negatives, although if you speak in negatives, remember that it can't create a picture for the subconscious because it doesn't know how to create a picture for a negative. It decodes most sensory stimuli, especially what you hear, what you see, what you think, what you eat, but smell is not decoded up here in the top part of the brain. It's recorded in the second layer, and it's very powerful. An odor will recall a memory for you faster than anything else. It really has the superego effects. You know, you have in other words, most of the brain doesn't think of other people. It's very narcissistic, especially among teenagers, very narcissistic. And part of growing up is changing that into the awareness through the superego of, I'm here, but it's not all about me. You're here too, so I got to be aware of what's happening to you. It has all the executive aspects: abstract thought, metaphors, planning, goal setting, paying attention, conscious, willpower, morality, so on. It's got limitless potential for processing concepts. You have a finite amount of memory, rote memory. I don't know that anybody ever really gets up to that level, but you only have a certain amount of finite. But you can process all kinds of concepts as long as you live. There's plenty of room for that. It uses all forms of language. It doesn't matter whether it's spoken or sign language. It processes slowly, 125 bits of information and 40 bits of human speech per second. That's fast enough for everyday living. And as I mentioned earlier, most teenagers are narcissistic. It's all about me. And part of being a parent is helping the child grow out of that narcissism and realize it is not all about me. It's about other people as well. The mammalian layer, no conscious thought there whatsoever. It only perceives present and past tenses. It cannot deal with the future. It only deals with now. And that's why it's important for you to talk to your brain in positive present tense right now phrases, because it can't do anything about the future. It doesn't use language. It only looks at the pictures that the third brain layer created, and it follows the pictures. And that's why it's so important to know how you're doing your self-talk. Because as I mentioned earlier, if you say to the kid, don't touch the stove, that is a negative. And there's no picture for that. So only give yourself and your children and your friends positive phrases, because it won't process. It's the one that does the smell. It directs the immune system. How about that? A subconscious part of your brain runs your immune system. So you've got to be really careful about what you program. It is lightning fast, 80,000 times faster in processing than the cognitive part of the brain. So it's important what you watch on television too, because it's so fast that it will take in those pictures, and it might not be a picture of something that you want to copy. In the second layer, that's where you transfer information from short-term to long-term memory. And if you can't get it into long-term memory, you've lost your memory, basically. The hippocampus is not only your brain's search engine, it's housed in the second layer, but it's the one that while you sleep transfers information from present to long-term memory banks. If you don't get enough sleep, you aren't going to transfer information. It also, however, is the part of emotional impulses. Something happens you don't like, and you can downshift to the second layer immediately and just be really impulsive. It's compared to the ego, not the superego, but the ego, in that it recognizes I'm here and I have to take care of myself. But you're here too, so I got to be really careful what I do so it doesn't negatively impact you. It's the basic foundation for all relationships, and I find that interesting because it's subconscious. So that means you have to be really careful about what you store in the subconscious. The reptilian, or the first brain layer, puzzles many, many people. It's still subconscious thought, but all you get with the first layer is present tense. So there's no point in trying to think about anything in the future or the past if you're in that first gear, because it doesn't process it. It perceives positives very easily. I was talking the other day with Tracy about tennis. And you can tell your brain, and there's on that first layer, and your what's the other piece under it? I'm getting tired. You can tell it what to do as long as you make sure that your first brain layer is making a picture that will follow down to the third brain, the third brain layer is making the picture that travels down to the first brain layer. And then you can tell it what to do. You can tell it where you want to have the ball end up. You can tell it if you want it to keep the ball within, the appropriate parts of the court. But it dominates when threats perceived. And that's really scary, because all you've got in there is the past. And we've already talked about the stress, 10 befriend, fight and flight, and so on. Research estimates that most crimes of passion are triggered when the brain is downshifted into the first layer. It's that reactive, homicides and so on, which is a little scary. That's where the id is. It's interested in being safe, about keeping myself safe. And so it can be very reactive in times of discord and so on, because I'm only thinking about how I'm going to keep myself safe. It is the part of the brain that helps us be aware of the outside and what's going on and how are we going to deal with it. It houses the reticular activating system, which has everything to do with whether you're an extrovert, an ambivert, or an introvert. And it impacts your sleep patterns. And if you're beginning to die, it's going to be the last part of the brain to die. Okay, so that's a general oversight, because although they work together, they house very different functions. So what do? You identify things in the past that triggered your downshifting so that you can be better prepared for the future and either upshift quickly or perhaps even avoid downshifting altogether. So you look at what's your history for adverse childhood experiences, what's your history for trauma and crisis, How about illness or fatigue or overwork? Negative experiences, what other people have said about you, good or bad, and identify how you behave when you downshift, and you can identify it. So what are your behavior patterns? Do you take the offender position? Do you become a victim? Is there something else that's going on? And how long do you stay downshifted? How long are you down there without cognitive thought that helps you make decisions in life? And once you do that, you have a little, you're more knowledgeable about yourself, and you can tell when you're downshifted. So how can you upshift? You can upshift. It doesn't have to take, 72 hours if you know what you're doing. So the first thing you have to do is identify something for which you are thankful. Because the only place that you can deal with thankfulness is up in the third brain layer. So that's one thing you can do. You can immediately say, well, I'm thankful for such, and upshift you go. Humor is absolutely wonderful for upshifting you. And it can be just slapstick humor. It can be something silly, but your right frontal lobe is the home of humor. The left frontal lobe is the home of laughter. So if you can find something really funny to upshift you and laugh about it, then you're already up in both of the frontal lobes. And people look at me and say, well, it's so embarrassing to say or do something simple. I says, well, do you want to upshift or don't you? Always use positive self-talk. Remember, negatives don't register in the second and the first brain layer. They just don't register. If you are a singer, sing. If you like to meditate, go pray for a while. Cross exercise is really fast to get you upshifted because you have to use both hemispheres. So you can put your right hand on your left elbow or your left hand on your right elbow, and it crosses the midline, and that activates both of the two hemispheres. You can picture yourself in a place that you consider safe. And as you do that in the frontal lobe, your brain will upshift. You can pick a task that is easy for you to do and over which you have some control. Because what you want to do is gain control again. So I might say to myself, Arlene, you are making pea soup. Okay, that's present tense. It's a task over which I have some control, and it will help you upshift. And any choice that you can make will upshift you, because this is the choice part. So you might say, and this was written before we had the research about you have to use your first name. So you would say, Arlene, I'm eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And that will upshift you. It's very easy to do if you're just aware, instead of spending 3 days or 72 hours, having inappropriate contacts and verbalizations with everybody else because you're downshifted and you're not getting it. During downshifting, the cortex shuts down, basically. And all you're left with are those simple first brain skills, and that's pretty deadly. So we find that when teachers don't know this, they're not really doing a whole brain teaching that manages the environmental feeling in the room. The kids start imagining fear and anxiety and thinking about bad things that happen to them and so on. Because you can't upshift another brain. You can downshift another brain. in a nanosecond by saying something that makes them fearful or feel bad, but you cannot upshift another person's brain. The only thing you can do is to exhibit a behavior that might make the other brain feel safe enough to upshift. So if you understand that you can downshift somebody, but you can't upshift them, then it gives you a little bit better perspective of how you want to deal with them. Because otherwise they're downshifted for 72 hours and everything's not going well in their brain. So what are the things you can do in the environment that will help them upshift? Hopefully not because you downshifted them. If you can possibly communicate at eye level, do so, because that decreases fear in a person. If you're standing up over them or you're very tall and big, that can be fearful. Look for their sensory language style. If you can mimic that carefully so they don't think you're just, doing something because they did it, but if you can somehow mimic their sensory language style, then they're going to feel safer. Suppose that you see them crossing their arms. If you casually cross your arms, they're going to feel safer because you're doing something that they did. Ask them what they think. Get their feedback. Don't start telling them stuff, because if they're downshifted, they're not going to remember it. But ask them what they think, and as they talk, you might be able to make a couple of comments. Again, anytime you can use laughter, anytime, it's going to upshift them. We don't laugh enough. Do you know that? Most people don't laugh enough. You need 30 belly laughs a day just to sustain health. And I know people who haven't laughed for ages and ages. Offer them a choice. Remember, choosing is something that will help the brain upshift. So ask them, do you want a drink of water? Do you want something to eat? Do you want to lie down? Do you want to listen to some music? If they can make a choice, which happens up here, they can do that. And whatever you do, don't argue, because they will come back with all kinds of things out of memory, and no two people perceive the same thing anyway. So the Apostle Paul says, and we've all been there, what I want to do, I don't do, and what I don't want to do, I do. That often has to do with downshifting, because when you downshift, you may not do what it is you want to do, because it's all those old tapes playing. But if you can get yourself upshifted, everything will go a little better. And if you understand this, you understand much of the angst that occurs not only in relationships, but at schools and at churches and wherever. So I think that's all you need to know. Are there any burning questions, or have you been overloaded with brain function? And remember, I didn't ask to do 3 sessions. Yes? Oh, lots of it. Wonderful question. Every thought you think, and I mean every thought you think, changes your brain. So if you begin to think negative thoughts, then you start making negative highways through your brain of neurons. If you choose to start thinking positively, you will not get rid of those old highways, but you will build new highways that eventually become stronger. than the old highways. You've driven places and you're on a highway and you can see where the old highway ran, and now there's grass growing up through the cracks and all of that stuff. So you wouldn't want to go on that road. And that's basically what happens in your brain. You start learning a new way and you build a new highway. Although the old one, if you live long enough, will gradually fade, but it'll still be there. Yeah. No, I'm sure you haven't heard about it before because we haven't known about it before. I'm having trouble hearing you. Could downshifting could it be a factor for functional neurological disorders? You know, I haven't seen any research on that, but my brain would say if the child or the adult is in an environment in which downshifting is continually triggered, then the resulting behaviors probably are coming out of old patterns. I don't have any studies that I can recall that talk about that, but I would think it might be a trigger. Yes. All right, so when something bad happens and your stomach starts feeling bad, remember that there's this big highway that runs between your brain and your stomach. And if your brain downshifted, you know, your stomach is going to know that because the brain is always talking to your stomach. And so a stomach ache is often a trigger that something bad is happening as far as your perception, and so the stomach ache is reminding you something isn't going on very well here. What can I do anything to change that? It's a very common symptom in children in school when they come from chaotic homes. Oh, I can't hear you very well. You're asking, how does the brain know when you're hungry? Well, the brain knows everything. Everything starts in your brain. It knows everything that's happening, and it needs food. Actually, its favorite food for making energy are healthy carbohydrates. And it will work hard all day, very much like, you know, water that's flowing over a dam and creating electricity. Well, it creates energy that's called ATP, and it stores that. So the next day you have some energy. So when it's getting low on fuel, if you will, you're not drinking enough water, and now you get dehydrated, and the cells start shrinking so they can't work effectively. It starts, if your thirst sense is okay, and if your hunger sense is okay, meaning that you haven't trained yourself, every time I feel this, I want a sugary drink instead of a glass of water, or I want an apple because I know my brain is hungry. It'll alert you, and you'll get a feeling, a sense that I need to eat something now, because it's monitoring you all the time. It's like it's got a thermometer in it of where you need to be when you have lots of energy and you can think quickly. And if the thermometer's going down, then it's going to ask you to do something. Give me some water, give me some food, give me some sleep, give me some exercise. get me out of the place of this person that's being unkind to me. I mean, everything starts in your brain. Okay, is that it? Well, I've loved being here again. I really like this country, as I said earlier. I'm welcome to leave. Oh, I'm welcome to stay. Okay. Permanently. Well, you know, if I needed to move, this is exactly the country to which I'd move. This reminds me very much of Canada and my childhood. So, just so you know, you get YouTube here in Australia, right?
We have running water as well.
I'm going to rephrase that. Do you have access to YouTube that would be shown in America? Thank you. I might have thought you would have gotten that the first time. I'd still move here. I do lots of, I put a new little video up every week, and it's only like 4 minutes long. So I take little bits of this stuff and just do a short little video. So some of you might want to look at that, but some of you might not. A fast, easy way to get to my videos is just to go to my website, arlenetaylor.org. And then when you look at the top bar, it'll say resources. Click on that and it'll take you straight to YouTube. Okay? Thanks for hanging out with me today. I enjoyed it very much.